breaking college football news. We'll dive more into it a little bit later, but Dave Clawson stepping down as the head football coach of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Going to move into an advisory role inside the university. So another opening here in the 7 FBS teams in the state. And was this 5 jobs now that will have been open with North Carolina, App, Charlotte, ECU, and now Wake joins that list. So more on that a little bit later on, but pleasure right now to go over to the guest line. Bring it on from CBS Sports, covering the NFL and the Dallas Cowboys. That's Garrett Podell. Garrett, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Garrett, we saw the Cowboys take on the Carolina Panthers yesterday. Going into this game, we looked at the 30th ranked rush defense for the Cowboys and the 32nd ranked defense for the Panthers. How are the Cowboys able to kind of make that offense run without any hitches behind Rico Dowdle?
I think what's been great for Rico Dowdle the last 3 weeks, he's had career highs in rushing yards in each of the last 3 games. I think what's really working is they're giving him the ball. I spoke to him in the Cowboys locker room a few weeks ago, and he talked about when they had the committee with Ezekiel Elliott and himself. Dalvin Cook factored in a little bit. Deuce Vaughn, their 2023 6th-round pick, factored in a little bit. And he talked about once Mike McCarthy named him the lead back and they kind of eschewed the committee and said, you're going to get the bulk of the carries, he said that just helped him so much from a rhythm perspective, understanding what is the defense going to do against him. And that's really been manifested on the field. You've seen in the last 3 weeks go for 112, then in the 120s, and then a career high 149 against Carolina yesterday. And I think you're really seeing somebody who's finally getting the bell cow reps for the first time in his career, and he's really exploded with it.
And then we look at this performance, this matchup yesterday. Was this more about the Carolina Panthers and their season? It's been disappointing, or the Cowboys that had high hopes and fell a little bit short, able to put up 30 points yesterday?
I think it's a little bit more about the Cowboys because even though the Panthers had played both the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs tough, losing just by 3, I think 30-27 in Week 12, and the Eagles, who are tied in record for the top seed in the NFC with Detroit, only 2 losses, 22-16. I mean, this was a team that only had 3 wins all of this year, and this was a Cowboys team that came in and kind of showed that even though they're incredibly depleted without Dak Prescott, without all-pro right guard Zach Martin, without Pro Bowl cornerback Trayvon Diggs, that they still have enough talent on the field to take care of business when they do face an opponent that, to put it bluntly, is simply not as talented as them. Micah Parsons had 2 sacks, and now he leads the NFL in both sacks and quarterback pressures since he's returned from his high ankle sprain in Week 10 that held him out for 4 games. So he really teed off on Bryce Young in the offensive line. Bryce Young, he was sacked a career-high 6 times, committed a career-high 4 turnovers. And so I think you really just saw Micah Parsons and defensive tackle Osa Odigizua up front really just kind of manhandle Carolina at the line of scrimmage. And then on the other side of the ball, CeeDee Lamb went off for 9 catches, 116 and a touchdown. No one else on the Cowboys really did much damage in terms of catches. I think 3 catches was the second most for any player in Dallas yesterday. But CeeDee, Micah Parsons, those guys were enough to get past Carolina yesterday.
Yeah, Garrett, we like to call those get-right games around here against the Panthers. Unfortunately, they've had too many of those this year where guys get right and kind of get pad their stats against the Panthers. You mentioned Micah Parsons and those 2 sacks yesterday. We know how frustrated of the season he's had. You mentioned the injuries. We saw him after that Bengals loss last Monday night, dejectedly walking off the field. But his future with the Cowboys, I got to imagine they still look at him as a integral part of them trying to get back where they want to get to. He's got to be a big part of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I stood right next to Micah Parsons in the locker room after that Bengals Monday night game that you referred to, and he was in tears. I mean, he was in tears for a couple of reasons. One, they lost promising second-year linebacker DeMarvion Overshown, who tore multiple ligaments in his knee and is undergoing surgery and has for a second off season going to have to rehab his way back from a severe knee injury, and 2, because even though the Cowboys aren't mathematically eliminated from postseason contention, it is an uphill climb for them to where it's hard to really envision them overcoming Washington, who's at 9-5. They're at 6-8. So not only would Dallas have to win out, but Washington would have to lose their last 3 games. So that's just very tough. But I do think Micah Parsons is definitely going to be a long-term part of the Cowboys' future. I mean, Stephen Jones, Cowboys executive VP, talked kind of out of both sides of his mouth earlier this week at the league meeting, saying we love Micah. I can't imagine there's a scenario where he's not wearing a star on his helmet. But then he also, at the same time, I think this component, what I'm about to get into, is more of a negotiating tactic, saying we have to look at the cap and how much money is tied into your top 5 or top 10 players. Look, the Cowboys showed last offseason with the Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb negotiations that they're going to publicly come to the media, which is good for all of us here on the air for business, and say, oh, hand-wringing, we don't know if we can pay him, top of the market, this, that. I can't believe he's going to ask for this much money. But with the way the salary cap just keeps going up year after year with the league media rights deal, continuing to inject more and more TV money into the league, the salary cap goes up. So proportionately, players are wanting proportionate amounts of the pie, and I think Micah's definitely going to get it. I mean, him and Reggie White are the only 2 dudes since 1982, when sacks became an official statistic, to have at least 13 sacks in each of their first 3 seasons. And this is a guy who is got 8.5, and he's missed 4 games. He'll probably get to 10 in these next 3 games. So I think this is, and when he's on the field, everything about what offenses do to game plan against Dallas changes because of what he can do in terms of disrupting the offensive line.
Garrett, as we look at elsewhere around the NFL, I don't know if anybody had more an impressive win than the Bucs did yesterday, going out to L.A. and really throttling the Chargers. How dangerous a team? Now, we'll see the Falcons tonight. They try to kind of keep pace with the Bucs there here in the NFC South, but how dangerous a team, if the Bucs make it in, could they be in the playoffs?
I think they could be incredibly dangerous. I mean, this is a team that's won 4 in a row since they started 4-6. They're now 8-6. And I love what I've seen from Baker Mayfield. I mean, he was a little inconsistent in the first part of the year. His overall touchdown passing numbers were high, but just you watch the games, he's a little inconsistent. But now he's now top 4 in the entire NFL in completion percentage, passing yards, and passing touchdowns entering, tonight's Monday Night Football games, the 2 tonight, which could change his stat ranks. But as of right now, he's playing like a top 5 quarterback. And if you've got a top 5 quarterback, you can definitely win in this league. And Mike Evans, even though he's on the other side of 30, I mean, sheesh, watching that game yesterday, he still looks like he's got the Mike Evans of old, very much still able to be tapped into. So I think when you have a guy playing like a top 5 quarterback and a real deal top 5 whiteout, at least that's what he played like yesterday, Mike Evans, I mean, you can hang with anybody. I mean, the big question to me in the postseason for them is, can they get consistency from their run game? Because this is a team the last couple of seasons that's ranked in the bottom 10 of the league in rushing. I don't know how balanced they'll be able to be when they play in the playoffs, but that would be my question. That, and then also just when they get challenged from a secondary perspective, because look, like, Quentin Johnston's doing a lot better, the Chargers' first-round pick in his second season, but there's not a whole lot of guys that are scary in terms of Chargers playmakers.
Talking NFL, Garrett Podell, CBS Sports. Garrett, meanwhile, the other team in the NFC South that's going the other direction, the Atlanta Falcons, they play tonight, Monday Night Football in Vegas against the Raiders. Is this the last shot for Kirk Cousins, you think?
I believe so. I mean, even though they signed him to a 4-year, $180 million deal, $100 million guaranteed, and the way the contract's structured, it's kind of prohibitive for the Falcons to get out of it. I mean, they can't really get out of his deal until after next season without incurring severe salary cap hits. But I mean, Kirk Cousins, he's been absolutely horrendous over the last month. So listen to this: they're on a 4-game losing streak. No touchdowns and 8 interceptions during this 4-game losing streak. And for CBS Sports, I was assigned to write the recap of the Chargers-Falcons game a few weeks ago, and I watched him throw 4 interceptions and at least 3 of them were just absolutely horrendous decisions. So, I mean, I would say this is definitely sort of a last stand kind of deal. He's playing the 2-11 Raiders. The way the Buccaneers are playing, the Falcons essentially have to win out these last 4 games for them in order to have a shot at the playoffs, which is disappointing for them considering they were out to a big lead early in the NFC South and had the head-to-head tiebreaker beating Tampa Bay twice. But, yeah, I would definitely say so, especially when you draft a guy like Michael Penix Jr. in the top 10, who he's not a developmental quarterback. He played a lot of college football and was the Heisman runner-up for the national runner-up at Washington last year.
And, Garrett, last thing, the Detroit Lions, a lot of people picked to win the Super Bowl this year, but the injuries, I just don't know how he can keep overcoming everything they got, and just a lot more bad news out of the game yesterday against Buffalo. We know now even on the offensive side, Montgomery's out for the season. Can Detroit overcome all these injuries and still be a potential Super Bowl winner?
That's a really tough question. I definitely think they could probably at least win a playoff game, win the NFC title, and make it to the Super Bowl. I really don't see that. I mean, because when we look at who they are, who the players are that have suffered these injuries, right? I mean, Aiden Hutchinson's been out since week 6. I saw that happen here in Dallas back then, and that was a really scary injury. But, yeah, the news that came out yesterday, so they lost their number 1 corner, Carlton Davis, who was a starter on the Buccaneers 2020 Super Bowl championship team. That's a tremendous loss because after him in the secondary, it's a pretty green and experienced group. They've got first-round pick rookie Terrion Arnold out of Alabama, and they have a couple other veterans, but that's a really thin secondary. And then up front, they lost Aleem McNeil, who was kind of their game wrecker in the middle, who kind of just absorbed blocks up front, really opened things up for their linebackers to make plays both in the run game and wreck shop when teams did drop back to pass. I think those defensive injuries are massive. And then also the news today about David Montgomery. He's going to have knee surgery and be out for the foreseeable future. I love the tandem of him and Jahmyr Gibbs. It'll be interesting to see Jahmyr Gibbs. He's kind of viewed, or at least they play him like he's their speed scat back. They do give him goal line touches. They do give him red zone touches. But it's going to be really interesting to see how Gibbs holds up this back part of the season without being able to get sort of the breather that David Montgomery provides. Because it seems like when Gibbs does go in the game, he's running 100 miles an hour and the defense looks gassed. I don't know if it's going to look quite as nice running the ball if Gibbs isn't able to have those same kind of breathers. So for me, I would say I look at the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you watch Sunday Night Football last night, I look at the Green Bay Packers as 2 teams who could capitalize in the NFC on those types of injuries.
Garrett Podell covering the NFL and the Cowboys for CBS Sports. Garrett, we always appreciate your time here in Charlotte. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Hope you guys have a great week. Would love to come back anytime.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, Garrett. There you go. Garrett Podell here on the Afternoon Rush. We're halfway home on a Monday. The top 4 with Clint coming your way next.